In this Nioh 2 build guide, I'm going to be showing you the Heavenly Apocalypse build, which is a Tonfa build that uses poison and combos things into oblivion. I'm going to be showing you the stats and skill points, all that stuff. This is a mid-game build. It's going to be used, you can use it early on and throughout the course of the game. I haven't made an end-game version of it yet, although I'm getting very close to doing so. So look out for the end-game version here fairly soon. The Heavenly Apocalypse build has a heavy focus on strong attacks because they absolutely destroy the key of enemies, and they allow you to disable them getting grapples and final blows, or simply just stun locking them when they can't do anything, if you're talking about harder to kill yokai. And one thing that's particularly great is when they can't do anything, they can't attack you, so they're going to be standing there just getting destroyed, and because you can do strong attacks very quickly in low stance, this is very effective. The way this build works is that you're going to begin attacking an enemy head-on with a strong attack from low stance. This usually moves you forward a little bit and gives you a bit of range. And it works well because it allows you to open. It means that you don't have to wait for the enemy to attack. You can attack first, and you're going to hit triangle, 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 and then square it to use the skill Heavenly Chain for even faster strikes. Then you're going to key pulse and use Demon Dance and follow up with Pulverizing Earth. A lot of times you're going to stagger an enemy before you can pull off this whole combo, or just outright kill them. So don't worry if you don't do this whole combo all the time. And some enemies are not going to allow you to do this whole combo on them, but this is what you want to aim for. Sometimes maybe you'll just hit a couple of heavy attacks or strong attacks with triangle before going into Heavenly Chain, because you know they're going to attack quicker and you can't do the whole thing. What's really great about this build is there are many things in the game that boost strong attacks or give benefits to strong attacks, like Guardian Spirits and sets. And it's very difficult to use or get the most out of these benefits when you're using slower attacking weapons because of timing. It leaves you wide open generally. But with the low stance of Tonfas, this isn't the case. You still attack extremely fast, allowing you to take full advantage of these things that give you like health when you strong attack or clear ailments, or even put imbue parity on your strong attacks if you want to set, that status effect. This build is amplified further with the addition of poison, which not only provides damage over time, but also increases the melee damage we do with this build by about 66% when everything stacks up. Using low stance with any weapon usually does poor damage compared with other stances. This is generally true for most weapons. However, because we're going to be using strong attacks instead of quick attacks, it's not entirely the case, and when you add that 66% damage from each strike, you do exceptionally good damage, and you do it very, very, very quickly. When it comes to stats for this build, you're going to want to have high courage and constitution with some points into strength and stamina as well. Courage boosts your damage with Tonfas the most and increases ki recovery, which is very important because you chew through ki with this build. You just use so much of it, it's not even funny, so you want to get that ki back as quick as you can. Constitution also increases your damage with Tonfas, gives you health, which you'll want because you're going to get hit sometimes, and is a needed requirement for armor, medium and light, so if you're going to use either one of these armor types, then you'll be wanting some Constitution. Strength is needed for the medium armor type, which we use with this build, and a few points into stamina will allow you to use the set that I've chosen for this build at the 70% weight threshold. You only need a handful, so this is great. And you can also place points into dexterity if you want to use ninjutsu if you want. There isn't as much of a focus on ninjutsu with this build as something like the Husarigama, so you don't need to, but if you want to, you can. When it comes to weapons, we're obviously going to be using a Tonfa, but you want to either craft one or find one. There isn't one from a set that we're going to be using for this, so it doesn't really matter which one you want or use specifically. However, you're going to want to avoid weapons that have imbue elements or corruption or purity on them if possible, because you want to place imbue poison onto your Tonfa, find one that has it, or either temper it. And because you're going to be attacking in quick succession, and you're going to be poisoning enemies to gain that melee damage in a lot of cases, or just to sustain it after you use your shurikens. So you can't put that on there if you have an other imbue on there. So you want to look for a weapon that doesn't have imbue on it. Just a note about imbuing poison here. In order to get this on your weapon, you'll likely need some quality Umbracite, and in order to get this, you're probably going to have to do a couple Twilight missions. Bonuses you want to look for on your Tonfas are melee damage, melee ki damage, and anything that benefits attacking in low stance. We'll be using a combination of strong attacks and skills with this, as I mentioned, Heavenly Chain. So melee damage and melee ki damage are the best choices because they're going to benefit both the skill and your strong attacks. If you take something that benefits skill damage or skill ki damage, it's only going to help with Heavenly Chain, and if you get something that benefits strong attacks, it's only going to help strong attacks. So you want to try and get melee and melee ki damage if possible, or even melee cost reduction. For ranged weapons, I like to use rifle and cannon since you'll have a lot of courage. They will deal really good damage, and you want bonuses on these that increase their damage if possible. Always the best concept here is one shot, one kill if possible, because you don't generally use these weapons while you're fighting. With regard to armor for this build, you're going to have a lot of constitution, which means you're automatically going to meet the requirements for light or medium armor, so you want to choose one of those two. I personally prefer medium armor, just because you will be getting hit from time to time when you're trying to pull off these long combo chains. It just happens. It's a very aggressive build, so you have to take chances sometimes to get in extra hits in order to try and stun lock that enemy with one extra hit or something like that. So sometimes you'll miscalculate or you'll get hit, or you'll just be locked into a combo and you can't quite get out of it, and or fast enough. So I like medium armor, but you can use light if you want. When it comes to medium armor sets, I really like the Kingo set for this build, or Kingo's armor, for a couple reasons. First, it provides increased melee ki damage as its last bonus, which is exceptionally good. We do lots of ki damage with this build, so increasing that is only going to help more. Secondly, it gives bonuses to final blow and backstab damage, which are relatively weak with Tonfas. You just don't do very much damage with these types of attacks, so it helps to shore up those weaker points of this weapon type. And lastly, with only a handful of points into stamina, you'll still be under that 70% equip load, meaning that your movement speed will still be very good and you won't chew through ki as you're sprinting around. But you can use other sets as well if you don't like this one. An example would be the Rightful Eccentric. This increases your strong attack damage by a total of 14%, which is a lot. But it's very, very heavy, and if you may not move very quickly and you may not like that, which I personally don't. So keep that in mind when choosing your medium armor set. For this build, I really like Magatamas because they increase your anima charge, which allows you to spam yokai abilities. And you're going to spam them a lot with this build, like a lot. And they deal incredible damage, which really helps out the build. So you're going to want that. Bonuses you want to look for on these are melee damage versus poison enemies and poison accumulation. Doesn't matter what else you have on these, you need those two things, because this is what really helps you pump out the damage. For samurai skills for this build, you're going to be playing in low stance predominantly, so you're going to want Ki Pulse Earth, Running Water Earth, and Purify Yokai Realm Earth. This is pretty much a staple for any low stance builds. And these are going to help keep your ki up and, give you buffs when you Ki Pulse, as well as make it easier to clear Yokai Realms. Additionally, Masterful Slice is not a bad choice here, since you can modify Heavily Chain with it, dealing even more ki damage when you use this ability, which helps to stun lock enemies. When it comes to Tonfa skills, you're going to want to take Demon Dance Earth immediately, and then Pulverize Earth after that. And then as soon as you can grab Heavenly Chain, get it. It's going to be a bit because you have to unlock the dojo mission for it. But as soon as you can get that, grab it. And you also want Focus Strike because it's good at taking down enemies at range and has a fairly fast cast speed. Other than that, you're going to be focusing on passives that boost your damage or give you ki, reduce ki consumption, like 3 Wars Kata, Relentless, Full Moon Kata, things you would use with other weapons as well. When it comes to shifting skills, you're going to want the same ones I generally recommend, which is the Yokai Within and Dark Within. These help with ki recovery, so do Special Finesse Invigorate and Special Finesse Refresh when you do burst counters, which should be all the time. But some other great choices for this build are the Dragon's Echo, Imperious Strike, and Dragon Vein. All 3 of these abilities allow you to gain more anima, which will allow you to spam yokai abilities even faster. So consider getting those as well after you've gotten these other ones, or work on getting them all at the same time. When it comes to Omnio Magic for this build, there's really only one thing we want to add. We don't put a whole lot of points into magic, so it's not something we're using a whole lot of. But you want Barrier Talisman because it helps with ki recovery. You're going to use this during tough yokai fights and boss fights, because simply you cannot recover your ki fast enough. Even with all the courage we have with this build, you will still not have enough ki for what you want to do all the time, because you can just tear through it with your combos. So using this talisman during boss fights or hard to kill yokai is going to speed that up, and don't be afraid to reapply them mid-boss fight because you're going to want to use them as much as you can. The Guardian Spirit you're going to want to start the game with for this build is Makami. I really recommend Brute Guardian type for this build. You're going to be up in the face of enemies constantly, so you want to be able to interrupt any burst attack they do, not just ones that hit you directly. So having a burst attack that, can do that is great, so I recommend having a Brute Guardian Spirit. What I like about Makami is that it reduces your melee attack ki consumption by 10%, which is all melee attacks, which is excellent, helps with ki management. And it also increases your yokai ability damage, which synergizes really nicely with this build. As I mentioned, it has a heavy focus on yokai attacks, so that's good. And also increases your final blow damage, which is a nice little boost, because as I said, you don't tend to do a lot of damage with the Tonfas when it comes to final blows. As soon as you get Hyobishin, you're going to want to change to this because it synergizes very well with this build. You'll gain increased damage as you fill your Amrita gauge, which is nice. You do more damage with yokai abilities that are red, and you dispel ailments on yourself a third of the time when you attack the strong attacks, which is going to be constantly, so you don't have to worry about being poisoned or confused or on fire or saturated, whatever. You're just going to remove these as you attack, which is excellent. And you also gain more anima when you're at low health, which helps, to give more increased anima with this build. It's also an offensive Guardian Spirit, meaning you're going to gain more attack than defense, which is nice because it's a very aggressive build. And it has a very high attunement capacity at 24, which I think is about as much as you can get. I don't think you can get higher than that. If you can, it's like 25. And then you're going to want to take Shin Roku for your secondary, because as a secondary passive, it's going to give you health every time you strong attack. So you're going to be gaining health when you strong attack as well. When it comes to soul cores, there are two that I really, really like for this build. The first is Magatsu Warrior, and the second is Yatsu no Kami. Magatsu Warrior increases your skill damage and gives you more anima when you attack with many attacks in a row, which synergizes beautifully with this build. Not only do we have a skill that we use constantly, but we want more anima, so that allows you to spam the Impaling Doom ability from Yatsu no Kami, which is the other one I really like. Besides the hard-hitting attack that Yatsu no Kami does, it also boosts your poison damage even further by about 17% against enemies, melee damage against poisoned enemies rather, and it gives you more anima gain, which is synergizes perfectly well with this build, so you really couldn't ask for more from this soul core. The problem is that it is a phantom type. It's purple, so you're gonna need to soul fusion it to red to gain the extra damage bonus from your guardian spirit to it. And the way you do that is you're gonna use a human soul core that's red, and you're gonna soul fusion it with that, and then change it to the brute type, and then you'll gain that extra 18% damage from your guardian spirit, which will just make that thing hit even harder. The last slot isn't so important. It doesn't really matter what goes there. You really just want to focus on having one that increases your attack by a lot, because you want to be, this is an offensive build. You want to take advantage of that attack multiplier of your guardian spirit. But ideally, this would be One-Eyed Oni. You can't squeeze it in because of the attunement cost. However, if you do have attunement cost -1 on all three of these, you could actually get it in. And why I recommend it is it gives increased strong attack damage, which you're going to be doing a lot. If not, don't worry about it. Just get in something with high attack here. When it comes to clans, there are 4 that I really like for this build, and those are Toyotomi, Takenaka, Date, and Saito. Toyotomi will heal you quite often when you attack, since you'll gain arena every time you strike the enemy, and so you'll gain like 20 or 30 health every time you attack, which is nice. Takenaka will increase your damage against poison enemies and will further boost key damage of Heavenly Chain, which is also nice. Date will help you with anima and allow you to spam your yokai abilities even more often, and Saito will help you with poisoned enemies, and it'll help you poison them faster, and increase your damage against tough-to-kill enemies. All of these are good choices. I don't know which one you should pick for you, but you really can't go wrong with any of these. Some final tips for this build. As I mentioned earlier, the tracking on the strong attacks and low stance is a bit wonky, and it will take you a little bit to learn how to use it effectively. So if you first start using it and you're like, this is shit, I can't hit anything, don't worry, that's natural. You'll just have to learn how to do it. There's optimal spacing for the attack because it leans forward quite a bit. So if you're right on top of the enemy, you're going to miss them. And this is one of the great things about having Demon Dance, is it spins you backwards, creating space in order to attack again. So you want to learn to use Demon Dance if possible. And you also want to learn to use Quick Attack too sometimes. Sometimes if you're right on top of the enemy and they just have a little bit more to go, it's not worth using Demon Dance and trying resetting your whole combo. Just hit them with a couple quick attacks and finish the thing off. If you do decide to use Dexterity for this build, which is totally optional to add some ninjutsu, I suggest grabbing things that help you poison enemies, like Poison Shurikens. This will allow you to set the poison status on enemies from afar away, so that every single hit you do will deal that increased damage against them, instead of, the first combo doesn't while it's poisoning them. Remember that repeated strikes with the Tonfas will increase damage with each hit, so staying in longer combo chains doesn't only increase damage overall, it's going to increase the damage of each hit, making you more effective with each hit. And this only becomes even more true once you gain the Apocalypse Mystic art. So try and hang in there as long as you possibly can. Learn to dip out when you have to, but try and get those long combos if possible. Lastly, Tonfas deal incredible key damage, which you knew and I've mentioned before, but they also block exceptionally well. Don't be afraid to block with this build. You can block very, very well, especially wearing medium armor. And if you can get your toughness up about 30 points with this build, you'll be in the, A range for toughness, meaning you'll block even better. So don't be afraid to block. You can absolutely be tanky with this and then go to town with your combos. Stay tuned for more Nioh 2, guys. We're going to be doing some endgame builds next, and maybe a couple other just crazy out there builds that maybe don't pertain to a particular weapon. So stay tuned for those. In case you didn't hear, we're going to be streaming with Larian on Thursday and Friday of this week, 8 a.m. Eastern time. They're going to be dropping by for some Divinity Original Sin 2. So we're going to be bullshitting with them, talking about the game. Maybe sneak in some questions about Baldur's Gate 3, if we can. I don't know. But drop by if you want to see us. Check us out on Twitch.